Yeah, I'll agree with that rating. That makes sense. I had a 2 in front of him as well. So
Edmonton added Tyson Barrie and Kyle Turris as the two big names, but that's not all you think. I know that.
yeah. Before going on air, we kind of, in the sense that as much as you can like the Barrie signing, I think the Barrie signing is perfect for them because I think they need a power play quarterback.
Yep.
And as much as you like the Kyle Turris deal, because I think they needed depth down the middle of the ice and
Correct.
production from their third and fourth line because they're so top heavy in the sense of the production. I still don't know how this entire goaltending carousel happened this offseason. And to be fair, it's not done. But how did like this many goaltenders change teams and they're going to roll out the same next year? That to me is just shocking because like it's proven to not work. So I think that's the biggest problem, is that the sense that you're almost a little scared of change, in the sense that they brought back Mike Smith for $2 million, which I think is an overpayment.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you're going to get any better production because those goaltenders are only getting older. Like Mike Smith is not going to come back and be better. Like
no.
So I think from that perspective, it's kind of like I would have maybe forced Arizona's hand a bit more and tried to get Kemper. I get that you were very tight against the cap, but I mean, in a way, you had to let Athanasiou go for nothing, which I think is looking real bad right now when he spent 2 second-round picks for him at the trade deadline.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Kemper's an extra $2.5 million on your cap compared to what they brought back Mike Smith for. You couldn't have made that $2.5 million work somehow. I mean, get rid of Larson. I mean, there's the cap space right there, right? So
yeah.
If you have Ethan Barrie and you have Tyson Barrie, you have your top 4 right shot guys. So I get that there's a lot of uncertainty around Clefbaum and whether he's going to play next year, but I mean, at that point, Broberg and Evan Bouchard are going to be, I think they're going to be ready to play because of the lateness to the year is actually starting, right? So I think they could have made it work, and they kind of took the quick out, and I think it's really going to hurt them. I think sport too, because I think from a depth perspective, I think they got better, but I don't know how far you can go unless you have goaltending and steady goaltending who can show up in the playoffs. So, good luck to them with Koskinen and Smith. But look, maybe I'm just being a negative Nancy, but I don't know how you run. I don't know how you watch that series against Chicago, how they were obviously the favorite going into that series, see the goaltending absolutely be lit up, and be like, we should run it back.
Let's do it again, baby.
Yeah, I think it's silly, but so from that perspective, they were probably originally in like a 3.5 range for me. They come down to a 2.5.
Ooh, savage.
And maybe that's being really, really harsh for one move. I think you have to look at its entirety and what it'll do to the team. So
yeah, well, no, I think I don't think you're wrong. It's as good as Barrie and Turris are. You said it. Like, they didn't address the biggest issue they had. Like, if they went out and got a good goalie, they could have, because of how top heavy they are and the fact that they have 2 of the best players in the world right now, arguably 1 and 3. It depends where you put McKinnon in that top 3. But I think you done goofed big time, because you had a chance to make moves. There were so many opportunities for them to go out and get a solid goalie, not just like an okay goalie. Like, they could have got, we've talked about, the fact that Murray went, and there was Markstrom, but there are loads of goalies who could have who did move around, and they didn't go for it. So I gave them a 2 beer, 3 sip puke rating.
Yeah.
Because they
makes sense.
Yeah. And from the 2 beer, 3 sip puke rating of Edmonton, we go to their lovely neighbor Calgary, who added one of your favorite boys in Chris Tanev. They also added another stud in Jakob Markstrom and Zach Ronaldo. If you assume technically he's in the minors right now, but you kind of think
he was a re-signing though.
Yeah, but it's like they re-signed him just to, I think it's like 700,000 or something. So it's a nice, cheap. I mean,
he'll knock a guy out for that much.
Yeah. And what do you call it? Andrew Magnapane. So
Magnapane, yeah.
Yeah, Spongy Lapani. I like what they did. I think they, with Markstrom, they got a guy who has always been a bit questionable, but last season played so well for Vancouver that it's a heartbreak for the Canucks to see him go. I know, we'll get to the Canucks and they've got other goalies now, but I think Markstrom is a really good signing in the fact that it's like Cam Talbot, but better.
Oh boy, is it Cam Talbot? Like, I would hope it's a lot better than Cam Talbot.
Yeah.
I think from a Calgary perspective, yes, addressing the Chris Tanev thing first.
Chris Tanev is your boy.
I don't think he's my favorite.
No, but he's a boy.
I think a few years ago, I was definitely on the Leafs should go get Chris Tanev. But I think their years have definitely taken a toll on him. I still think he's an effective top four defenseman.
For sure. Yeah.
Still think he's an effective top four defenseman. I think he's very injury prone. And I think he was propped up a lot by playing with probably one of the most dynamic defensemen I've ever seen in Quinn Hughes last season.
I thought you were going to say Cody Ceci for a second. That was a subtle jab at Cody Ceci being a pylon. Carry on.
Okay, that's now we've lost him and his family to this. They're not going to be watching our show anymore, but okay. Damn
it.
No, but I think Chris Tanev, it's interesting when you look at Chris Tanev because I think he's an upgrade on Travis Hamonic, which is who he's replacing in the lineup.
Yep.
But and they lost TJ Brody.
Of course.
From that perspective, but I mean, you can still lose Hamonic and Brody. Bring in Tanev and still look at their defense and be like, this is still solid enough.
It's still solid. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, Giordano is getting older, slower, which you're going to have to address at some point.
But they can address that if they get rid of number 13.
Yeah, we won't go into that, but
well.
But okay, but yes, you have Giordano, you got Hanifin, and then you got Juuso Välimäki on that left side, and that's a very strong left side. Yeah, cute. Very strong left side. You bring Chris Tanev back. He's still Rasmus Andersson. Like, it's still a very strong top six defensive core. So I think, was it maybe a bit long on term at 4 years? Probably, but I think he's still solid enough to give you value. I think TJ Brody was out the door regardless. I think he had his heart set up in Toronto. Especially when, I don't know if it leaves a bad taste in your mouth when a team tries to trade you the summer before, and the only reason it doesn't is because the other guy that you're getting traded for doesn't want to go there. So I think that left a bad taste in TJ Brody's mouth. But
yeah.
So I think, from a Chris Tanev perspective, I don't like the term, but I like the player. And on a second pairing, if he's playing with Noah Hanifin, I think Noah Hanifin's skating and distribution is good enough to kind of protect him a bit.
Mm-hmm.
On to Markstrom. I mean, growing up, Kiprusoff was probably one of my favorite players. I loved Mika Kiprusoff. But I think ever since Kiprusoff left Calgary, they've kind of been on a roller coaster of who's going to play in net. Kari Ramo, Yoni Ortio, Brian Elliott was in there. Mike Smith was in there. Like, they've had so many kind of like stopgap solutions that they've never really taken the big swing for a guy to kind of really solidify it.
Yep. Their swing.
They would say what you will about Markstrom's kind of track record, but I mean, Vancouver was probably one of the worst defensive teams for kind of protecting against high value scoring opportunities. And so he was, for the past 2 seasons, he's been just so busy. And so his numbers, I think, are pretty accurate in the sense that they do reflect how good he actually is. So, I mean, paying he's making less than Matt Murray, and I think he's a much better goaltender at this point. So I think it is, hopefully, because I am a bit of a Calgary fan. I do like them. I think from that perspective, I think it's hopefully that solidity that they haven't had since Kiprusoff. So
yeah. So what do you give him? What's the end? What's this end number you got for him?
For Calgary, I still think Calgary's not done. I would have liked to see them add a top 6 forward, because like I think that was one of the biggest areas, is that when Tkachuk went out of the playoffs, they couldn't score and they couldn't generate offense, which was a bit worrying because, I mean, Monahan's consistent, Goudreau's consistent, and you have other guys, Elias Lindholm and stuff like that, but I still think they could use another kind of top 6 forward. I'll throw a name. I think Jake DeBrusk would make a lot of sense out of Boston. But I think someone like that would really kind of solidify this team. So I think it's probably a 3.5 for me right now. 3.5 to 4. Yeah.
Interesting.
I really like the Markstrom deal. I like Kristanov as a player, but I think he'll be exposed on the later end of that contract. So
yeah,
as of right now, it's a 3.5 to 4.
I give him a straight 4. It's a straight 4 beer night. They've done well. You're pleased with what you got, but it's not overwhelming. It could be. You could be. I think they have the chance, if they do a couple things, to go up a little bit. But straight 4 beer night under the Canucks, who lost Tanev, who lost Markstrom. They added Braden Holtby. And I think this one of the steals of the Canadian teams is the Canucks picking up Nate Schmidt. And he's going to be a stud. Emphasis on the stud.
Yeah, living in Vancouver, that's all I've kind of heard the past week.
Yeah,
but
understandably so.
Understandably so, but I also think that same day, it's the same day they acquired him, like Fire Benning was trending on Twitter. So
yeah, well, it's
yes. Sorry, go.
No, well, I was just saying, like, it's hard to, they take the gamble on trying to get Tanev, Markstrom. They're like, them trying to make all of these moves. None of them go through, and within a couple days, it's gone from, oh, this is a dumpster fire, what's going to happen, to, oh, actually, it's not too bad if Braden Holtby is going to get better. And, ooh, Nate Schmidt on a steal. Ooh, I kind of like it.
I think there's 2 trains of thought to kind of look at the Canucks off season. You can like the individual moves that they made. And especially going into this off season, I was kind of behind let's go with Demko and supplement him with a kind of 1B kind of starter.
Yep. I'm not convinced with Demko still.
Fair enough. But I think in the sense, in the past, they went with the older guy, like when they traded Schneider and they went with Luongo.
Yeah.
And they kind of, it made sense at the time because their team was still in the win now period and they still had the Sedins and they were a bit older. But I think Markstrom at 30 years old, going forward, his age bracket just wouldn't allow you to be successful and add the flexibility that they need when they're going to be competitive. I think Demko showed me enough in the playoffs that he should get a bigger role.
Yep.
And
fair enough.
He's the right age to grow with this team. And he provides you a lot more salary cap flexibility, because the last thing you would have wanted to do is re-sign Markstrom at, 6 years at $6 million, lose Demko to Seattle, and then you're stuck with, a 33-year-old goaltender when this team is really starting to get good. When Quinn Hughes and Pettersson and Besser are really starting to hit their prime. I think that would have you wouldn't have been able to move the goaltender. You would have been stuck on the salary cap, and you would have had little wiggle room to make your team better. So I think this was a play for the
future. Absolutely.
It was kind of, but last year was kind of like, it was a nice little run. It was a bit fast. Like, we didn't expect ourselves to be there so quickly.
I think it was a surprise.
Demko and that progression is the timeline that we actually think we're on. Let's not abandon that just to keep Markstrom and to stay competitive. Let's supplement Demko with, let's not forget, Braden Holtby He's won a cup and he's won a Vezina. So
he knows what he's doing.
Him as a 1B, look, he's had a tough 3 seasons in Washington statistically, but like he's not going to be the guy playing 60, 50 games next year. It's going to be, closer to, a 40-40 kind of split, right? So even if they play an 82 game season, right? So
50-50 split. Eh?
Yeah, there we go. You're the host for a reason. No, but I think from that perspective, I think it's important to kind of think Demko is the kind of their long-term future. They're not committed to Holtby long-term. They can protect Demko and kind of grow with this team.
Absolutely.
Looking at the, sorry, go.
No. I was just saying it's just I think it's the one team that made their moves exactly looking 4 years in advance. And I know it's easy to say that because some teams are like Toronto's in a win now kind of mode. Ottawa is in a who knows what mode, just trying to get to the cap floor. But I think they've really made smart choices. Like Jim Benning has come out of it looking much smarter than when he was after the second day of free agency. Because I think a lot of people were calling for his head, and then it's kind of turned out in a way that, it's not like it's like a, know the difference?
Yeah, I do know the difference. But I think at the same time,
maybe one more time. Ooh,
Yes, you can hear the intrigue even through that. But no, I think from looking at all their moves in aggregate, you can kind of look at the goaltending situation made sense for them to go the way they did, especially at the price point that Markstrom ended up signing for.
For sure.
Schmidt was just kind of that was lucky that happened, and it was kind of a golden opportunity, and he's a massive upgrade on pretty much anyone that they were rolling out last season besides Quinn.
The obvious Quinn.
Yeah. Whether he plays the right side or the left side doesn't really matter. He'll be really solid, but I think the one problem is that they still have a lot of bloated contracts on that team, and they've gotten worse. Because it's fine if you want to roll the dice for all the reasons I mentioned before on the goaltending.
Yep.
Why they let Stetcher go for nothing is kind of shocking, especially when they have absolutely no proven prospects who can come in and play on that right side. They're kind of going to assume that someone can do it unless they sign a free agent for nothing because they have no cap space left. I think the biggest thing I think that hurt the Canucks fans was the doing nothing up front. Because I think when you saw Toffoli come into this team, it was kind of like we naturally now have two top kind of we have two top kind of lines now. But they had a solidified top six. And so losing Toffoli kind of hurt because I think it really balanced the team, because I think before you really had a question of who's best are going to play with. Is it going to be Pettersson? Is it going to be Horvat? When you had Toffoli, it didn't really matter because you could put them either or, and both centers would have an opportunity to play with a scorer. So I think from that perspective, I think Vancouver's really taken a step back offensively. They brought back Gaudette today, but I think a lot of Canucks fans are fed up and tired with Virtanen. So who knows what happens with that situation.
They need Virtanen to play like the top six forward everyone thinks he should be, or projected to be, look like he was going to be. So obviously the frustration makes sense, but
I just think he's disinterested every time I watch him play hockey. He just looks and
and so they got to move on.
Of course he's not, but yeah, I would agree with that, and I think most Canucks fans would agree with that sentiment as well. But I think the biggest problem is that Benning still looks dumb to a lot of people because yes, he's made the Schmidt move was a good move in the goaltending, as I said, but he's put himself in his own situation. The Roussel contract, they're still under contract, and the Louis Eriksson deal is just suffocating this team. Even the fact that Bertschy's on the team for $3 million, how he didn't buy any of these, how he didn't buy Bertschy or Sutter out is beyond me. Buying out Eriksson is impossible because it wouldn't actually give you any cap relief. But I mean, at this point, I would be phoning Detroit and I'd be like, I'll give you a first round pick if you take Eriksson's contract. I really would, because I think you have, yes, the Canucks have 14 million coming off the books next year with Edler, Sutter, and oh boy, who else? Tanner Pearson, I think, is the third one that comes off the books. So they have a decent amount of money coming off the books. But I mean, like, from a long-term cap perspective, I think Pettersson's number next year starts with a 9.
Reasonable.
I think he'll be in the not, like, if Mikko Rantanen gets, I think he's at 9.25. Like, Pettersson's going to be at 9. I think they're going to try to bridge Quinn, because I just don't think they can afford to give Quinn what he's going to want coming out of that entry-level deal. Is that they're stuck on the salary cap. And I do think that a lot of these moves were made, as I said earlier, because Benning didn't expect this team to be this good this quickly. And so he was expecting by the time this team was good that, you know, Beagle and Roussel and all these guys would be off their cap and it would have been a natural transition. But because this team performed so well so quickly, and, you know, Pettersson's one of the best players in the league, even at his young age, that they're kind of stuck, and that these guys are going to make a lot quicker, and that they're kind of stuck with these contracts. So
what do you give him? What's your halftime Brewskis trademarked, not trademarked 6-pack rating?
2.5.
Oof.
Yeah, the only reason it's not a 2 is because of the Nate Schmidt deal. Because I just don't know how you look at that team and be like, for the 8th time, I'm going to say this, the goaltending situation made sense, but it did get worse. It got worse for the prospect of it being better long term. Their defense, I think, is still, although Schmidt's an upgrade, they lost 3 top 6 defensemen. So they brought in 1 so far. So I still think probably the defense overall is probably a bit worse, even though they got the best player in throughout all the kind of goings and comings and kind of stuff like that. But I mean, the forward line's just not as good as it was. So I think to say they got better is wrong.
Well, that was a Stephen A. Smith worthy rant with a little less anger, but definitely the time length Stephen A. Smith took. Who would have thought you cared that much about the Canucks? I care 2 beers and a sip, and then a couple to, you know, whoever you're seeing on the side. We didn't give the Leafs a halftime Brewskis 6-pack trademarked, not trademarked rating. So very quickly, in a non-Stephen A. Smith seconds, what number do you give the Leaf?
4.
Oh yeah, that's fair enough. I was like a 4 beers and a sip.
If they get Mackenzie Weegar, we're looking at 4.5, maybe 5.